Before this episode begins, we want to give you a trigger warning. We want you to know that the content of this episode speaks to pregnancy loss and miscarriages and/or a viable pregnancy. We understand this content may be triggering to some of you, and you may wish to save this episode for another day. Remember, your emotions are valid, and we encourage you to take care of yourself and reach out to reliable resources for support when you need them.
Getting the testing done. So you had recommended that, and I didn't know. I was like, should I? And I really just trusted you. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I'm 26 weeks pregnant. So it worked. Yeah.
Congratulations. You did better in that second cycle, and you were, 38 or 39 at that point?
38.
38. And you were 36 the first time you did?
36. Yeah. I'm a dietitian. We take care of ourselves. We care about our health. So we just kind of went into it without doing really anything in particular. But the second round of IVF, we did more research, and I think my husband was on a multivitamin to help the sperm, and he was focusing on more fruits and vegetables, and we were exercising consistently, not too much, but 3 times a week, trying to be consistent with that. Dietary wise, I had made some changes to my diet, some pretty significant changes, even though I ate healthy. Because of the PCOS, I was typically eating pretty low carb, which is pretty common with women who have PCOS. So I did an analysis of my nutrition and realized my carbohydrate intake was pretty low. And so I worked on increasing that a little bit. We increased my fruit intake by quite a bit because, again, people with PCOS, or if you're concerned about carbs, they tend to avoid fruit, which is not really the right thing to do, where it's full of antioxidants, full of vitamins and minerals and fiber that can support your gut health.
Hi, superhumans. I'm Dr. Mavis Garcia.
And I'm Dr. Wise.
We're 2 of the physician leaders at Markham Fertility Center, otherwise known as our baby, MFC.
As fertility specialists, we've witnessed firsthand the challenges, triumphs, and the myriad of emotions that come with trying to conceive. Whether you're just starting to think about having a baby, actively trying, or facing challenges along the way, My Fertility Podcast will be your go-to resource for honest conversations and a supportive community.
So grab a cup of coffee or tea and settle in, and let's demystify the world of fertility together. On today's episode, we welcome guest Brandy Williams. Brandy is a registered dietitian and the founder of Be Well with Brandy. She specializes in helping women improve their health and wellness in a sustainable way. Brandy also had a long journey with fertility, which she very bravely shares with us today. Through her Instagram account, @BeWellWithBrandy, she shares her journey to offer support and raise awareness of recurrent loss, IVF, and infertility, ensuring that others in similar situations feel understood and supported in their experience. This is going to be an amazing episode. Brandy has a lot of experience, both personally and professionally, in the world of fertility, and she's here to share her expertise with us today.
And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us as well. We're so excited to have you here. I have to say, I was very, very excited to chat with you because I'm a big believer in food and diet and the importance of nutrition. I'm a big believer in, you are what you eat kind of thing. And I'm so excited for this conversation. But why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your fertility journey?
I've dealt with recurrent miscarriages since the age of 25, 26 was when I had my first pregnancy. I have had around 7 losses, all in the first trimester, between 6 and 8 weeks. I developed Zika when I went to Mexico. I was diagnosed with Zika and had to delay, obviously, getting pregnant at that time when everything was going on for about 6 months. I've done IVF 2 times, and we did use a gestational surrogate with our first round of IVF. So the first round of IVF I did was in 2021, kind of mid-COVID a little bit, we were kind of waiting, all the COVID stuff was going on. And I had decided to do IVF after my recurrent losses because I wasn't really getting any answers on why it kept happening. So we thought maybe seeing a fertility specialist would give us some more answers. And the process of IVF, we knew we could do the PGT testing to see if the embryos were chromosomally normal. And we were able to do that with our first round. And with my first round of IVF, I think we had 7 embryos and had them all PGT tested. And I had 2 PGT normal embryos. So I decided to do 1 embryo transfer on myself. We hadn't anticipated on doing IVF a second time. I really kind of went into it just thinking, okay, we'll just do this 1 time. I was 36 years old at that time. And we did the transfer with a PGT normal embryo. And the fertility clinic had done a few things differently that I've never done before. So we were trying some stuff that I had never done, hoping I'd be able to carry. And it didn't actually implant. So I didn't get pregnant with that embryo transfer. And with the last embryo, we decided to use a gestational surrogate because I just didn't know if I was going to be able to carry to term. And we really didn't anticipate or want to do a second round of IVF. So we had found a gestational surrogate in Halifax, Nova Scotia, just by chance, actually, through a support group. She was looking for intended parents, and we were looking for a gestational carrier. So I was really struggling after the embryo transfer loss because I was processing a lot of the grief around not being able to carry to term, using a gestational surrogate, which is a whole other ball game and a different set of circumstances you have to come to terms with and think about. My husband was extremely supportive and helpful in the process of doing all the things that you have to do to set yourself up for a gestational carrier. So we had to meet with her. We did some Zoom meetings. We went and met with her in person, and she ended up doing the embryo transfer. I think that was in 2022, and she ended up getting pregnant. So the embryo transfer worked, and we went to her ultrasound. The 8-week ultrasound went well, and she unfortunately ended up miscarrying around 10 weeks, and we really don't know why. She had never had a miscarriage before. She had 2 healthy children of her own. And so that was, Mike and I, when that happened, we really thought that this was it. We're going to have a baby. This is finally our time. So we were pretty devastated after that happened and didn't really know, had no idea at that point what we were going to do. I find in this space, you really don't know what you're going to do until you're forced to make that next decision.
Yes,
I
that's
didn't want to
right.
do IVF again. And I had no idea at that point what we were going to do. And a lot of times you go into that planning mode, like, oh gosh, after you process the loss and you're dealing with all of that. And it was really complicated because now you're dealing with somebody that wanted to be a gestational surrogate for altruistic reasons. Like, she just really wanted to do it because she knew somebody that had done it herself and thought it was a beautiful thing. And she had to go through that experience. So I felt really guilty for bringing her into our, you know what I mean? That kind of our black cloud. And so I had to process her struggling with that and her having to go through that. And it just felt really strange after that had happened. And we obviously lost our baby girl. So I had somebody that reached out to me. Again, this is the power of Instagram and social media, because I wouldn't have heard about you guys, your clinic, or Dr. Garcia, who was my fertility doctor, had it not been for Instagram, because somebody had reached out and let me know about you, that she had a friend that had gone to see you with a similar history. She said you work with a lot of women that have been dealing with recurrent pregnancy loss or maybe more complicated cases. And so I went to Instagram right away, checked it out, and really was able to see you speak and your personality, which I think is amazing to be able to see before you actually contact the provider, kind of get a sense of who they are and what they stand for. And so we reached out, and I think you answered me the night I messaged you. My husband and I were like, whoa, she emailed us back like 2 hours later.
That sounds like me. I'm attaching my phone. I'm embarrassed to
Yeah, but
admit.
not that anybody needs to be doing that, but we were like, wow, I wasn't even really expecting to hear from you directly. So we had begun discussions and we decided to switch clinics. We didn't have anything wrong with our clinic. We had a good experience, but there was nothing new or nothing different that they were going to be able to offer us if we did a second round of IVF. So when you're again I'm kind of now, I'm like, 37, trying to decide, I don't really want to do IVF again. I'm still trying to process what are we going to do. So setting up a meeting with you. And after I met with you, it was just, I can do this. I can do another round. I have it in me, the resources, because again, it's a financial decision, it's an emotional decision. I remember telling you how scared I was to take that
Mm.
leap of faith and try again, because part of me wanted to give up for sure, which everybody in their own fertility journey has the right. If they need to stop, if they have to stop. I don't like that keep going no matter what kind of toxic positivity,
Of course. Yes.
because you just don't know, right, what people are able to do or
Mhm.
can do. And I was on the
Mhm.
brink of giving up for sure. So you gave me a
Mhm.
lot of hope because you were able to offer me something different. We're going to try this. And if this doesn't work, we're going to do that. You don't want to be doing the same thing again and again. You want to know that, okay, we have some plans that we haven't tried before, which give you a new sense of hope. You still have hope because you're willing to consider trying again. But to speak to you and to know that we had other options, it gave me a lot of hope that maybe this was the right next step for us.
I remember you and your husband were there together. I actually remember the view of your window.
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
that? I think you live on the lake. You have a really nice view. I
We have
remember that.
the Cannabacasis River behind us. Yeah.
That's right. And hearing your story, I'm thinking, wow, there is still so much more that we could do here because of your age and your ovarian reserve and what you've gone through in the journey.
And I remember you said there's no guarantee, which you gave me
Mhm,
realistic advice, and it felt really honest. And I could sense the
mhm,
compassion from you and the empathy, which I feel very fortunate to have that, because I do know that there are some others that may not experience that. It can go a long way,
mhm.
especially when you're dealing with type of thing.
That must have been extremely difficult to have had the miscarriages when you're so young, and then the IVF with normal embryos, and a perfect surrogate with supposedly a perfect embryo and no answers at all.
Yeah, extremely frustrating. Yeah, and
Mhm,
confusing, and you don't know where to go
mhm,
next. And just being online, seeing some other people that were at my fertility clinic at that time were having success. Okay,
mm,
these people that were struggling, they're pregnant right now. And as hard as that can be to see, it also still gives you a little bit of a, okay, it still might be able to happen for me.
mhm,
Like, I'm not quite ready to throw
mhm.
in the towel. I still have a little
That's
bit
right.
left in me to push through.
I think both as a fertility specialist and Dr. Weiss can attest to that, as a fertility specialist and also having been through my own fertility journey, but especially as a fertility specialist, one of the hardest things for us is that sometimes there's just no answers to the things. Even though we did better and we're going to get to the second part of your journey and I got you to your goal, I couldn't answer why that happened back then. And that is really frustrating. I hope that we get to the point in the future where we're able to provide those
Right.
answers and do the tests that say this is why a miscarriage happened in what seemed to be a perfect situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then
There's
tell us about part two. What happened after we met?
So we're in St. John, New Brunswick. So we live in New Brunswick. We had to start coordinating, getting to Markham Fertility to do the retrieval. I think you put me on maybe birth control for the first couple months because I have polycystic ovary syndrome and my periods were a little irregular and my cycles were a bit longer. We had done that to kind of, I think you had said, to regulate my period and while we're waiting to go for the retrieval. So my husband and I drove down. We decided to drive our car. I think it might be about like a 10-hour drive from where we are, and we had to stay in and around Markham to do the retrieval. My husband and I, leading up to it, we were focusing on anything we can do to improve egg quality and sperm health, even though my husband's sperm, technically, everything looks great. My egg quality was a bit questionable my first round of IVF because I only had, out of 7 embryos, only 2 were PGT normal. So they had thought possibly egg quality could have been an issue associated with your recurrent pregnancy losses. That may have been a part of the puzzle. And unfortunately, as even a healthy embryo doesn't necessarily always implant. So I didn't get the chance
Mhm.
to see. Maybe it would have worked had I have gotten pregnant with that first embryo transfer. So we did that second round and we ended up a kind of similar situation. It was pretty similar in terms of the retrieval, in terms of the number of eggs retrieved, maybe a few less this time, but we ended up with, I think it was 7 or 6 embryos that we did the PGT testing, and you called me. I was on my way to Shania Twain.
I remember.
I was in the car and I wasn't expecting to hear from you because I thought I was going to be like a little bit longer to get the results back. And I answered the phone. It was you. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, what's wrong? What's going on here? You're just waiting for the ball to drop.
That's usually the reaction I
Yeah.
get when people hear my name on the phone. I'm used to it
Yeah.
by
And I'm
now.
driving. You end up telling me the results of the PGT testing. And we had 6 PGT normal embryos, which again, I was
Wow.
hoping for, well, 1. Ideally, you're like, okay,
2?
1 would be
Yeah.
good. We don't want to have 0, but where I was older and you just don't know, right? To hear 6, I was absolutely in a state of shock. And I don't know if you could hear that in my voice.
Oh, yes.
When,
I remember you kept saying all over again, "Okay."
no, that's all you said.
I could just imagine Dr. Gracie being like, "Are you
Yeah.
okay?"
Well, so then you're processing it, and I'm driving, about an hour outside of St. John to Moncton, New Brunswick. I hung up with Dr. Garcia, and I was just like, didn't know what was going on. And I ended up getting lost. I took the wrong exit, and I was like, all just flustered. And when I arrived at the Airbnb we were staying at, I was meeting some girlfriends. They just kind of looked at me like, "What's wrong with you?" Because I was crying, and I was just like a bit of a mess. And I just looked at them, and I was like, "We have 6 PGT normal embryos," and just again, just in that state of shock, processing that for probably that whole evening, I would say. Called my husband, obviously, right away and told him, and just honestly felt like we hit the IVF lottery. That's literally how it felt. And it felt like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, thank you for something is going right. Something finally went right. And this gave me a huge sense of relief that, one, I might not have to do, hopefully, a third round of IVF, which again, at that point, I was like, I'm not doing this. Is it. This is the last one. I'm not doing another one. So to know we have 6 embryos to work with, I knew that I was going to be able to try again, because if I had one embryo, I don't know that I would have tried on myself. We may have used a gestational surrogate again. I'm not sure what that decision would have been. We would have had to discuss that, but we met afterwards and you had said, we were talking about doing some immune treatments or maybe some immune testing. And you had said, well, since the retrieval went so well and you have so many embryos, why don't we do the first retrieval? I'll give you the kitchen sink. I remember you saying that. Like, I think we were on letrozole. We did intralipids, which I had never done before. So you did a little bit of immune treatment. We did like a steroid. And you just said, let's just see what happens. And then if that doesn't work, we can look at doing because it's expensive, right? Getting the testing done. So you had recommended that. And I didn't know. I was like, should I? And I really just trusted you. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I'm 26 weeks pregnant. So it worked. Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations.
You did better in that second cycle, and you were what, 38 or 39 at that point?
38. 38.
38. And you were 36 the first time that you did?
36. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We went into the first IVF transfer, really, I'm a dietitian. We take care of ourselves. We care about our health. I guess you go into it a little bit naive and nobody really talks about egg quality or sperm health or your nutrition or lifestyle factors that could potentially impact egg quality and sperm. So we just kind of went into it without doing really anything in particular. But the second round, we did more research, and I think my husband was on a multivitamin to help the sperm, and he was focusing on more fruits and vegetables and we were exercising consistently, not too much, but 3 times a week, trying to be consistent with that. Dietary wise, I had made some changes to my diet, some pretty significant changes, even though I ate healthy. Because of the PCOS, I was typically eating pretty low carb, which is pretty common with women who have PCOS. So I did an analysis of my nutrition and realized my carbohydrate intake was pretty low. And so I worked on increasing that a little bit. I increased my carbohydrate. I think it was about 50% of my overall intake, which is on the lower end of the carbohydrate recommendation. So mine were quite a bit under that. So increased my fruit intake by quite a bit, because again, people with PCOS, or if you're concerned about carbs, they tend to avoid fruit, which is not really the right thing to do, where it's full of antioxidants, full of vitamins and minerals and fiber that can support your gut health. So I increased my fruit intake. I incorporated a little bit more plant-based meals, not completely. I was still eating lean proteins, like animal proteins, but I tried different recipes like tofu and chickpeas and lentils, some vegetarian recipes. We had really focused on, when I looked at our lifestyle, I thought alcohol might have been still something that we needed to work on. And again, nobody really talks about that. And I know we had the conversation, Dr. Garcia, when we had met before my retrieval, and I said, what do you think? And you kind of said, it's not going to be doing anything positive, right, for egg quality. So there's really no benefits to it, right? So we had both worked on reducing alcohol and then completely cut it out about 3 months prior to our retrieval, which is not what we did before, because we would be social drinkers. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to be looking at. Like, I were to give some advice, is I've seen people go into a retrieval smoking cigarettes and not knowing the impact that could have on their IVF cycle. Binge drinking or drinking too much, which is pretty common nowadays, just the way we socialize, and not knowing for sure and not being really told, that might be something to focus on. So then you kind of just, with behavior change, you just, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. No one's told me to stop. So those lifestyle factors like marijuana, I think you guys might be doing a podcast on that, smoking.
Yeah, we have some podcasts coming up. By the time that this one comes out, those ones will be
Okay,
out already.
perfect.
So
So people
yeah.
can check that out. So that
Yeah.
was our
Mhm.
thing. That was something that I wish I had done earlier, is paid more attention to that, because that's just how we socialize with our friends and family. And I think that could have potentially impacted something. Again, you don't know, right? You don't know what made the difference.
I think the things are very important for sure. And when you're going into this and investing so much time and money and your emotional energy, of course, you want to do everything you can to maximize the success rate. At the same time, we know that the ovaries almost have a mind of their own, and they go through cycles of good egg quality and bad egg quality. So I think there is an aspect of that as well.
100%. Yeah.
This brings me to the question about when you're working with patients in the realm of fertility, in the realm of PCOS, how do you introduce them to this concept, and what advice would you give?
Normally, when I'm working with a client that's coming to me, I'm going to do an initial consult first to go over their history and look at their diet, look at the history in terms of, some people are coming to me having already done a round of IVF that maybe didn't result in the result they were hoping for. I'll talk about what did the fertility clinic look at? What are they looking at doing next kind of thing? We've discussed potentially, should you be switching clinics? Is there more support that you need potentially elsewhere if they can't offer something different? So I'm often looking at their diet first. So we're going to be looking at what their diet quality looks like. And I like to look at the husband as well. So again, a lot of us are forgetting that the male factor plays an important role.
It's important too.
Yeah, creating a healthy
Up to
embryo.
50% of the equation. Men are not off the hook.
Exactly. And it's always the women coming to me, I've done this, I've done that. And I'm like, what about your husband? what about him?
Exactly. We hear it all the time.
I think both partners should be working on diet and lifestyle changes. Don't just focus on what supplements should I be taking. That's another common one that we see in the fertility space is, well, what supplement are you on? What supplement are you taking? Supplements are meant to be that, something that supplement the diet. And we'll see people spending a tremendous amount of money on a lot of different supplements and a variety of supplements that may not even be the right ones for them. Work with a healthcare professional, work with a registered dietitian or a registered naturopath that has that training and knowledge on giving you individualized supplement advice, but also don't forget about the basics and the foundations of diet, stress management, proper sleep, movement, and exercise. Those things are really important. And I do see a lot of people just taking supplements and they may think that's good enough. I don't have to adjust my diet. I don't have to focus on those other foundational components to overall health and the potential to improve egg and sperm quality as well to make healthier embryos. So we're looking at the diet of both of them. And I don't like to focus on prescribing restrictive diets. I like to focus on what they maybe want to be focusing on adding in and really take an individualized approach because I'm not going to send them a meal plan, forcing them to eat a bunch of food that they don't like. So it's really finding out what are your likes, what are your dislikes, what do you normally have, and then what could we do to improve that so that the behavior change aspect isn't quite so overwhelming because they're already coming to be overwhelmed. I might see low fruit intake, low vegetable intake. They're not eating any whole grain. Maybe they're eating a lot of processed food. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. I always emphasize that with my clients. And I think that's important in this space as well, because I see a lot of people terrified to have anything like ultra processed fast food, or it's like, I can't have any of that at all. And that's not really the case. We want to make sure your overall diet quality is looking pretty good. But you can certainly enjoy some sugar. You can certainly enjoy some indulgences and some takeout meals. Doesn't need to be 100%. But if you're doing those things on the regular, it's probably not going to be, the best thing to support your overall health. We start there and make that a little bit more individualized. I'll be looking at their medical history. So if they have PCOS, that might inform an evidence-based recommendation for certain supplements like inositol or melatonin, potentially prior to a retrieval. I had one client not even taking a prenatal before her retrieval. So looking at what their supplementation looks like, if there's anything like potentially adding in omega-3 prior to their retrieval as well. So we look at supplements. A lot of that has to be individualized to that person, depending on their diet and lifestyle. We have to look at stress management. That's a big one. And I'm not saying just relax and you're going to get pregnant. Obviously, no, that's not what it's all about. But we do know that, and I know how I felt going through everything. Your nervous system is dysregulated. You're kind of in that fight or flight mode. You're dealing with grief, trauma, and you're, just continue going because you're on that time frame. So you're not necessarily taking a lot of time to recover sometimes. So looking at that, because I do see a lot of people that have a lot of trauma, they're maybe not going to therapy yet. So it might be just a referral to see a therapist to do that while in the wait as well and to work on some stress management tools and strategies. I'll look at their exercise and movement. So a lot of people I see might be quite sedentary. And again, both partners looking at that. What do you like to do for exercise? Let's start there. Do you like walking? Have you done strength training before? And then really setting simple goals for them to start with. Some people really love swimming. So we might look at, okay, what's in your area in terms of facilities and resources that you have? What are you able to do? And help them get that set up, which has been really great. I've had a lot of clients not exercising start to exercise more consistently, which we know can help reduce inflammation, control blood glucose levels. If we're dealing with PCOS, like that insulin resistant piece is really important. And just helping with that stress management. Oftentimes people feel a lot better doing some physical activity just mentally where they can be struggling in that area. I'll be looking at sleep and the circadian rhythm a little bit. What are the habits before bed? Is someone a night shift worker? What was the quality of sleep like? How many hours of sleep are they getting? And see if there's ways that we can improve that if that's an issue. If it's not an issue, we'll focus on the areas that we know impact your overall health a little bit more. Some people I see, their diet's great. They're actually eating fairly well, but maybe they're overly restricting, or again, maybe their carbohydrate intake's a little too low, or we need to make some tweaks, just some small tweaks with that. And then I might be dealing with somebody that the stress is just beyond, and that's really what they need to prioritize. And I'm looking at as well, like their overall gut health, because that can impact nutrient absorption. So how well they're even utilizing the supplements that they're taking. Your gut can actually create vitamins in the gut too. We know that the gut microbiome is involved in the inflammatory process and the immune system. So 70% of your immune system is located in the gut. So making sure that when we're making changes to the diet and the stress and the sleep and the movement, all of those things are foundations for improving your gut health. So we're doing that as we work together. But I do have some people that come to me that if I'm looking at, okay, how healthy is their gut, they may have a lot of bloating. They're dealing with a lot of loose stool or diarrhea, or they might be completely constipated and going to the bathroom 1 or 2 times a week. So I'm looking at their symptoms, like any stomach pain, extreme bloating that's not normal, symptoms that may be affecting their quality of life. I'm looking at their bowel movements. So you can use the Bristol stool chart to see on average. Again, some people might have a loose stool once in a while. You might not go to the bathroom perfectly every week, but what does that look like day to day? And overall, if you're having loose stool every single day, that's not normal. It may be affecting nutrient absorption. When you're going into fertility treatment, I think the goal, and you guys would know this too, obviously, is to manage any chronic health conditions. That's like important to make sure that people are managing any chronic health conditions that they have. And the gut is extremely important to your overall health in general.
I just want to bring you back to a point that you said previously, which I thought was so, so interesting. So you mentioned that when you were looking at your diet before you were heading into your second IVF cycle, you were looking at the amount of carbohydrates you were taking in, and that you actually increase your carbohydrates. And I thought that was so, so interesting because right now it seems like, especially on social media, there's so much talk about women with PCOS where the quote unquote ideal diet is low carb or extremely low carb. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So if we're looking at low carb diets, in my 30s, I've been eating low carb because of, again, the PCOS and some blood sugar issues where I get low blood sugar. But when you actually look at the research on carbohydrates, we need carbohydrates for our gut microbiome to function. I should clarify the different types of carbohydrates. So if I'm looking at somebody with PCOS, they may have a high carb intake, and their carb intake may be a lot of simple carbohydrates. So refined sugar, like a lot of added sugar, a lot of baked goods or sweets or juices potentially, or pop that they could be consuming. So we aren't talking about those carbohydrates. We're talking about more of the complex carbohydrates, like the whole grains, the oatmeal, brown rice or quinoa, whole grain bread, which a lot of people are afraid to be eating at all. But we know that whole grains support the gut microbiome and can reduce inflammation, as long as somebody doesn't have celiac disease or a condition that could impact, obviously, they can't be eating that. If it's an allergy, that's a different story. But if they're dealing with a lot of food intolerances, just as a side note, food intolerances aren't a sign that your gut microbiome isn't optimal. You're not able to digest potentially the carbohydrates that you're eating. That's where the low FODMAP diet can come into play when people are struggling to digest carbohydrates. And then some people are actually not digesting potentially protein properly. And there's a lot of metabolites of protein metabolism that may be causing inflammation, maybe causing issues. Let's say it's okay, I have PCOS and I've been told I need to change my diet. And people might drastically change their diet and go on PCOS type diet or get a meal plan from somebody recommending that they cut out dairy, they cut out gluten, they cut out all carbohydrates, they go lower carb. And then they're eating a lot of protein. And when you don't have carbs, you're eating a lot more fat, you're eating a lot more protein, which again, if they're not digesting those things well, the high fat diets may not be ideal. The type of fats that they're consuming, we don't know. If they go low carb, they may be increasing their saturated fatty intake as opposed to the polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fats like avocado or olive oil and some of those good healthy fats. So we lower carbohydrates and we end up reducing fiber intake, and we need fiber. It acts as a prebiotic for our good bacteria in our gut. When our bacteria eat our fiber, because that's who's doing a lot of the digestion in our large bowel, they're digesting and fermenting our carbohydrates. For their fuel, they're creating what's called short chain fatty acid. And we know short chain fatty acids reduce inflammation in the body. So I think we're just going to these points where we're going too extreme. Certainly, if somebody's carbohydrate intake is 70% of their calories and it's not the right type of carbohydrates, that's not going to be ideal for polycystic ovary syndrome. When I'm working with a lot of clients, we may see that there's a lack of fruit's a carbohydrate, right? So a lack of fruit intake, but they might be having a lot of these simple carbohydrates. So switching the type of carbohydrate you have first is what's really important for PCOS. And then honestly, the easiest way to look at it, if anybody, has PCOS and is listening, is trying to have more balanced meals, because you're going to naturally put your macros where they maybe should be a little bit more naturally without having to track or pay too much attention. But a little bit of carbohydrate at breakfast, that could be some oatmeal. That could be a slice of whole grain bread. If you're scared to have 2 pieces of bread, maybe have 1 slice of bread to start. It could be gluten-free bread if that's the way you need to go. And you can look for a gluten-free bread that has more fiber in it. At lunchtime, it could be you're adding in a whole grain pasta to a salad, you're having a pita or a wrap, or you're doing quinoa or couscous or something like that. And then at supper time, again, it's just a quarter of your plate. It's all we're asking, not a whole plate of pasta, but you could be doing a quarter of your plate with some of those whole grains and complex carbohydrates. That's what I ended up doing. I'm just going to start having some carbs at breakfast, at lunch, and at supper. And in the beginning, it is a little bit scary when you have that carb phobia where you're a little bit afraid, but fiber actually stabilizes your blood sugar really well. A lot of people talk about protein, and certainly protein can keep you full and keep your blood sugar stable, but fiber does a really good job at that too. And I think that's something that we're forgetting about quite a bit. And we know the positive, as long as you're digesting fiber well. And if you're not, you might need some help to improve that, because you can. And you can switch the type of fiber too. That's always possible. Again, low FODMAP fibers tend to be digested a little bit better, and you'll still be getting fiber if you have to do that to manage if you're having uncomfortable digestive symptoms. But then improving the overall health of your gut, you have to have fiber to have a healthy gut long term. And we know that with the research that's out there on the gut microbiome and how it functions. And so, yeah, you might feel better initially, but what's the long term impact of that low carb diet on our health and wellness long term?
I love that term, by the way, carb phobia. I think that no, seriously, I think that just hit the nail on the head. I think for the past, what, 10, no, oh my God, longer than that, 15, 20 years, there's been so much carb phobia. And that now trying to change that, it's like, even in my own mind, I feel it in my soul, the
I
carb
know.
phobia, I have to admit sometimes. Carb phobia, I love that.
It used to be fat phobia, and then we moved
Yeah.
on to carb.
I know
Yeah.
it sounds so simple and people don't like that simple nutrition advice, but I think balanced meals is just one of those more sustainable ways that you can eat for the rest of your life. I worked in weight loss for 10 years in my career. So I've worked with clients that have done keto, and I've been working with them for, it could be 6 months, it could be up to a year that I'm working with them or longer. And I've seen them not be able to sustain something like that. It's not fun. They don't enjoy it. At first, it might be great. And at first, they might be feeling amazing, but then they're scared to eat a banana. And then you have to
Mhm.
think, is that healthy? Is that normal? Like, banana, really? Is that where we're at with nutrition now? Because it's getting so complicated now, or I guess there's so much misinformation out there now that people are scared to eat seed oils. People are scared to eat bananas. It's getting really confusing when you're seeing that type of information, especially when you're looking in the space of diet and fertility. I see a lot of people talking about things that they're doing that don't have a lot of research or support, that may not be necessary and causing a lot of extra stress, and not something that they're going to be able to potentially maintain during pregnancy too. That's something that I worry about, because I know I was really sick and nauseous my first trimester. And what did I want and what did I crave the most were carbohydrates. You go into a pregnancy without eating carbs all of a sudden, now you're bloated. You have more like fluid retention, because that's what's going to happen. You might have more digestive issues if you're not eating carbs and then you begin eating them, because your gut microbiome's like, what the heck? I'm getting fiber, I'm getting carbs now. And maybe it's not the right carbs, I guess, too, in the first trimester sometimes, but you're only going to be able to do your best in that first trimester, depending on what symptoms you're having. And I know that I was pretty grateful that I wasn't afraid of carbs when I was pregnant, because that's what I wanted. I wanted noodles. I wanted simple, basic, like plain
Yeah.
toast and some simple stuff. And then once that went away, I was able to, again, focus on better quality meals and nutrition once I started to feel better.
You're right that balance is important and simplicity is important. I think you're right. A lot of times people don't like the simple advice of, if you're going to have a drink, have one drink a week, not one drink a day. And just tell me exactly what I need to do, when I need to do it in a very prescribed way. First of all, there's not that much evidence that specific makes a big difference, that you could never have carbs or you could never have fats or you could never have this or that. And the second thing is it's just not sustainable. You need to do something that can be part of your daily life in a sustainable way. I am guilty of every diet.
Mm,
I've tried
yeah.
everything. And you're right. At the beginning, you feel great, but if it's not sustainable in the end, then what are you really doing? And if you get to the point where I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do that, then it's not really.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's a lot of all or
Mhm.
nothing out there. And a lot of people coming to you that have a big history of dieting, right? So it's working on some of that mentality and some of that mindset around a different approach, which people actually sometimes really appreciate because they're just like, oh, okay, I don't have to follow. I'll give them recipe ideas. I have a bank of recipes I can give them and I let them choose. Like, here's some breakfast options that are really great. Choose what looks appealing to you. If you already have things that you enjoy eating or you're curious if this is okay, ask me. And I'm probably going to say, yeah, but and here's a way you can maybe balance it out a little bit more, add a little more fiber to it to keep you full in between meals, to keep your blood sugar stable, to feed your good bacteria in your gut. So those are some of the things that I think are really important. And it's an added stress that people don't need to be thinking that their diet has to be perfect. It doesn't.
Yes, infertility is stressful enough, and you're already doing a million things and changing your life in a million different ways to fit into this journey you don't want to be in the first place. So you got to find things that are enjoyable, that you like to eat, and that are also good for you. Absolutely.
Exactly. You have to also consider that I know there's people that are looking to lose weight before, retrieval. The whole weight thing, I think we need to be definitely focusing on health habits. I often wonder, is it the weight that's impacting things or is it the health habits people have? Because not everybody that has a higher BMI has poor health. They're not automatically unhealthy or they don't have good health if they have some excess weight. I think looking at someone's health habits is more of an important thing. So if you do have a higher BMI, but your diet looks pretty good and you are exercising consistently and you do sleep pretty well and your stress management is pretty good, some people maybe they're not on any medications. Their blood work may look really great. Those things I think are things that we have to be looking at a little bit more. I know there's research showing that weight can impact fertility and delay time to conception and stuff like that. But I also wonder, are we looking at those health habits of those individuals in the study too? I haven't looked enough into that to know, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Because I know at your clinic, you guys are able to, because that can be a big stress for people going into a retrieval, is they have to lose weight and if they're on a timeline, they're looking at losing weight really quickly. And
Hmm.
so again, they're maybe doing something restrictive that's going to help the weight come off a little faster because they might have 3 months to do it. Where I would be more inclined to say we need to be focusing on those foundational health habits that are going to make a difference, potentially whether weight loss happens or not. We know there's research that does support that. And usually some weight loss will happen. Even if it's 5% of your total body weight, that can make a big difference. But thinking that you have to get to a certain BMI, I think can be problematic for people and cause a lot more stress, knowing that that's something that they might have to do.
You did hit the nail on the head. We know that BMI is imperfect, and a lot of those studies, that's just the only measurement that they have. And I agree that the habits are more important. I mean, there's certain numbers of BMI that we do have to look at because of regulations with sedation and the risk of aspiration and sleep apnea and things like that. But outside of those higher numbers, yeah, definitely. When I meet patients, I ask them, what is your height? What is your weight? And then I ask them, is that high for you? Is that low for you? Is that stable? And then I ask about those habits. You're right, because those are more important than the actual number on the scale. I agree. I want to talk about your journey a little bit because your story is very typical of many people that I see as well. So you had the miscarriages, you had an IVF cycle, you had a surrogacy that was lost, unfortunately, through a miscarriage. Then you came to me, and when we met, I had no idea, obviously, that you would make 6 embryos. I think that would be both of our wildest dreams at the time. So not knowing how many embryos you would make, we talk about, okay, we might need to look into another surrogacy journey. We might need to look into immune testing because of all of your prior history that was at the time unexplained. But then you had that cycle where you just knocked it out of the park and had 6 beautiful euploid embryos. And then when we met again, we had to sort of rethink our whole strategy, right? Because what I noticed a lot of times is that sometimes when you have a really good cycle with really good embryos, that alone can solve the problems without getting into the immune thing. Now, if you have only had 1 embryo or 2 embryos, knowing that you don't want to do more IVS, knowing the cost of doing more IVS, then for sure I would have gone a lot deeper into the immune testing. And then there is a question of if you only have two embryos, one for you and one for a surrogate, and that's it. So we got to give that one that you have everything, immune testing, all the things. But when you do have that many embryos, not only do you have the ability to transfer one, and if it doesn't work, pivot to other things, but there seems to be better pregnancy rates, better implantation rates when you have a cycle that makes good quality embryos. And this is all to say that as much as here at Markham Fertility Center, we're big believers in the immune testing and we're big believers in not doing everything again and again and transfer after transfer, there is still a lot to be said for just having really good quality embryos. So I think a lot of the times when we see recurrent pregnancy loss and recurrent implantation failures, this is why I like to start with an IVF cycle with PGT to see what the egg quality is and to see what the embryo quality is. And then once you have that, then you can make some decisions about where to go forward. And it's not that if you have that story that you absolutely have to do immune testing. It's not black and white. It's looking at the person as a whole and their goals and the long-term journey for them and what they're willing to do and not willing to do, the cost of everything, and the ability to make embryos. And I'm always thinking long-term, if it doesn't work, what's my next step? If it doesn't work, what is the next step? So even when I'm planning your first transfer, I'm already thinking about what am I doing next if this doesn't work, right? And that has a lot to do with the number of embryos that you have and the quality of the embryos that you have.
Yeah, which is why I trusted you so much. You didn't just think it in your head. You explained it to me exactly what we were going to do. Once we knew the PGT results, you explained why you thought we should go ahead without doing the immune testing on the first transfer, knowing that we had the 6 embryos, knowing that the cycle went really well and thinking that your body might be really receptive to this. But I'm also we're going to add in intralipids. We're going to do the Lovenox. We're going to do
Mhm.
these other things that you haven't done before.
That's right.
Again, we'll never know for sure what it was. And I don't think I care to know. As long as I have a baby, it doesn't matter what the reason was in the end. It would be nice for sure to know, but to know that we did that. And you also told me if this doesn't work, right, here's what we'll do next. I think that's a really important thing because we're always thinking next step, right? And for you to have communicated that to me made me trust you and say, okay, let's do what your plan is, right? And it saved me from spending a lot of money on the immune testing, which I appreciate.
If I could kind of summarize the philosophy, it's almost like we always hope for the best, but in the back of our minds, we're all planning for the worst, right? In the sense of we want the cycle, the transfer to be successful, and we're going to give it our all, the kitchen sink. But that in the back of our minds, I know I'm always start thinking, okay, what am I going to do next? What else can I offer? Where can we go from here? What are other options? And you're right. I think it's really important to have those conversations with your physician because I think personally, I always find it reassuring to know that even if something fails, there's other options, there's other steps that knowing that there's a plan B and a plan C and a plan D is reassuring.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily common that people are getting that type of advice either. A lot of times it's let's just go again, let's just do it again. And I feel the frustration of the clients that I work with that are just like, they did do it again. Maybe they've done it 3 times and they don't know what to do anymore because now they're okay. This seems a little bit crazy to just go and do it again. And maybe it's a numbers game. It can be for sure, but that's not really what you want to hear when you're investing that much money financially and you're dealing with the emotional toll of all of that stuff as well.
Given your extensive experience as a dietitian and also being a fertility patient yourself and having gone through so many things, what advice would you give somebody who was you back at the beginning of your journey or even in the middle of your journey or anywhere in the journey? What advice do you have for the fertility warriors out there that might be listening?
So if we're talking to anybody dealing with recurrent pregnancy loss, I would say it's that 3 miscarriage thing where a lot of times you're getting like a recurrent miscarriage panel, you're getting some investigations done with maybe your OBGYN, maybe you're not even seeing a fertility specialist yet. I would suggest if you have had about 3 miscarriages, you should be going to a fertility clinic to help you figure out the reasons why you may be miscarrying. Again, we may not know, but if you're working with a clinic like Markham that has worked with a lot of these complicated cases and are willing to look a little bit deeper to maybe be able to offer you a bit more. I think finding a clinic that can do immune testing in case you need it, you may not, but would be an important thing. I kind of wish that I would have done that a little bit sooner to save me potentially from years of the emotional trauma that I had experienced. Don't be afraid to switch things up if your clinic isn't going to change the plan. I think that's potentially why I am currently pregnant, 26 weeks pregnant, is I wasn't comfortable doing the same thing. I just thought like, my gut doesn't feel like that's the right choice, even though it could have worked. I needed to change things up and do something differently. So being okay opening up or talking, if you're not okay speaking up yourselves, I do have a lot of people that will follow me on social media and reach out for advice. I'm at this clinic. What do you think? And I'll give them my honest opinion on if I think maybe they should switch it up. If they're not feeling heard and they're not feeling seen, I think it's okay. And it's your right to switch that up and to change things if you need to. You're going to be spending the money already. Obviously, it's not ideal to have to travel for IVF treatment, but it can vary with the type of treatment you're going to get from clinic to clinic across Canada. So doing that research and looking into that, I think is important. Looking to find support from others who have experienced recurrent miscarriage or who are dealing with infertility is really important and can be really comforting and helpful navigating the emotional challenges. I found it really invaluable to hear other people's stories, to learn and learn things from it. I found out information that I may have never known, because a lot of times you do have to advocate for yourself in this space and be able to ask questions and be a little bit more informed to be able to ask those questions. So trying to find that support network if you're feeling alone or feeling isolated, I think is really important, because you can learn a lot from people that have gone through similar situations, and it might save you a certain step that maybe you don't have to do. Or like in my case, when somebody told me about you, that introduced me to another option, because I was talking to people and I had some support and I was following people that were going through similar things. Even if you're not talking about it personally, finding those support networks is really important.
Yeah, the power of Instagram is amazing. I have so many patients that tell me that hearing other people's stories or connecting with other people and feeling less alone, it's really crucial. Thank you so much for your time, Brandy. We really appreciate having you here and sharing your amazing story with us. We can't wait to see the announcement of this baby being born on Instagram. I sure follow you, so I'll know when that happens.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great.
It was a very interesting conversation. It feels like, especially now in this time of social media, there's so much out there about diet and especially about restricted dieting, that it's really refreshing to hear a take of balance. Everything is okay and that carbs are not the enemy. And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast, or visit us online at markandfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episodes.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss. Music from Mix Kit Raising Me Higher by Ajay Stelino. My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.